God alone, God alone, God alone's all we
To know that we are a channel, we are an instrument, that if we are living a life that's in tune with God's will for us, then He will give us the power to do it.
patient endurance brings you to victory.
Good morning, everyone. Tighten this up. So the topic today, pardon me, faith demands the courage of conviction. This morning, I did not know that I was going to be giving the talk today, so that was a perfect preparation for it, if you think about it. But interestingly, I was actually almost laughing when we were meditating as I thought about that. I picked my white shirt that I usually wear when I give the talk. And I thought, oh, I'll wear this. And I had the thought, well, I'm not giving the talk, but I'll just wear it anyway. And that was bizarre. And then 2 days ago, Jaidara back here gave me a little bit of a haircut. And you know, again, I had no idea that it was all in preparation for this moment. So that should be a lesson for all of us, is that God has a plan for us. We don't always know what it is until it's the time has come. Nayaswami Nivritti couldn't be here with us this morning. She made the supreme effort, and maybe she's tuning in at home, but she wasn't feeling well at the last minute. And I happened to be there in the foyer where she says, I really need to go. And there I was thinking, does anybody else know that this is happening? This must be mine to do, you know? And that's really the kernel of this topic, is that life will give us these tests or these challenges. And if we can remember that if we can recognize it and say, for instance, giving Sunday service talk, that's not a bad thing, right? That's definitely something in service to God. Well, if this is mine to do, God will give me the words and the strength to do it. But how do we get in touch with that inward knowing, with that inner voice? I mean, it's very easy in a situation like this, on the one hand, to accept it and say, well, of course it's God's will. We can't just not have a talk. But, you know, it'd be very easy to also say, well, I'm not prepared. I can't do this, you know, listening to the mind, right? But in our everyday life, how do we hear what it is that God wants us to do? Because it really is that simple. If our life, if we can simply know what God's will is, then all that's needed is for us to have the courage to go and do it, right? So how do we improve that knowing? Yogananda said that meditation, that intuition was born of meditation. Another way to come at it is finding those people. I'm not the world's best meditator. Some of you who know me well know that. But brushing shoulders with those people who are in tune and who are in the flow, that's the kind of way you can piggyback too. So I'm going to open up some notes here. Amazingly, I have notes. Typed these all up last week. No, I'm just kidding. When Jesus says, I came to bring the sword, that one always puzzled me, because he says, I didn't come to bring peace. And of course, as meditators, we know peace is the goal, right? That we have more inner peace in our lives. And it just occurred to me, maybe a better word for that is ease instead of peace. I didn't come to bring ease to your life, to bring comfort, you know, to bring, as I pass down on Camino Island, there's a road, it's called Easy Street. And I always laugh. You know, 10 years ago, I'd be like, I want to live there. But now I know there is no such thing. But I didn't come to bring ease. I came to bring the sword. And Swami says, he interprets that as the sword of discrimination, knowing what is ours to do, knowing what is right, having the courage to go ahead and do it. And like it said, God tests the firmness of our faith through these tests. I think it was Yogananda's most advanced woman disciple, Gyanamata, who said, an easy life is not a victorious life. So that's something we can also take inwardly and tune into. What parts of our lives seem a little bit too easy, seem like maybe we're snoozing 2 or 3 or 4 times on the alarm clock. You know, all those little areas where we're not pushing ourselves. I think COVID, while on the one hand, the pandemic pushed us in ways that we weren't used to, having to stay home and stuff. There was also an element of ease that kind of crept in where, oh, I don't have to put on my slacks today. I'm only head up on the Zoom, right? Or I'm supposed to stay home, so Netflix time, you know. So what areas of our lives are we not really making the supreme effort? And one thing that I was tuning into this week was bringing that energy. The conviction that we're talking about is energy. So if we know what we're supposed to be doing, if we're supposed to be living in joy, we need to bring all of our energy, knowing that God will supply the joy, but we need to meet life's tests. And one way we can do that, practically speaking, is in our own practices. The first one I want to mention is in chanting. This week, I was tuning into Yogananda's Cosmic Chants, which he said he chanted each one of them until he said they were spiritualized and until they took him into ecstasy. And then he said, okay, this is one that I want to give to people to chant. And so anyway, I was in the group meditation and I was chanting the chant, Deliver Us from Delusion. And as I was chanting it, I was noticing how the notes seemed to be going all over the place, up and down, up and down. And I started to feel, wow, this is happening in my chakras. This is energizing. So I just pushed into it. Brian was leading the meditation, and he brings energy to his practices. It's really remarkable. So I was like, wow, Brian is singing really loud. What do I should sing loud too. I should try that. So I did. I tried to match his energy, and I started to really feel that inward sense that this chant was working on me. And I wouldn't have gotten that if it hadn't been for Brother Brian and his positive magnetism that was going for it, really going for it. We know we want to meditate, it brings joy. We know we want to serve, it brings joy, it helps the world. But how are we actually pushing ourselves into those practices? What's the next step for us? One example is I was a little like 4 years behind on watching it, but I'm a basketball fan. And I got a lot out of watching The Last Dance. I don't know if any of you saw that. It was the story of the last year of Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls. And I was not a Michael Jordan fan. I was a Utah Jazz fan, unfortunately, during those years. And so I didn't have I had a bias against Michael Jordan. But in seeing it from the inside out, the level of energy that he brought, I mean, tested on all levels in life. He was tested. They were saying terrible things about him in the press. They were attacking him and his father, and I mean, bringing it all through. And he put out an amazing amount of energy to meet those tests. I mean, there was no reason they should have won. And I didn't know that as an outsider, but you see the inside story, and it was him. He made the decision. You know, he didn't say, oh, what will be, right? He says, what will be is what I will make it. I have a part in this too. There's a divine plan for our lives, but what's missing is us. The plan is there. God is always there listening to your prayers. But if you're not there when you're praying, right? When you're meditating, if you're not showing up and actually realizing, I'm actually meditating. This is my one moment that I have to be with God. How often do our practices become mechanical? Do our service become mechanical? You know, where's our mind when our hands are moving? Are we really here? You know, Michael Jordan, Black Jesus, as his rivals called him. You know, he was there, 100% there. So I didn't know I was going to be talking about Michael Jordan there, but. The other thing in Master's teachings that I was tuning into was the Whispers from Eternity, Master's prayer demands. He called them prayer demands. It's not enough to just say your prayers. I remember as a kid in Sunday school, they said something like, oh, say your prayers every night, almost as if just simply by doing them, you could check it off the list, and that was enough, right? Or some of our maybe we have some Catholic refugees here. Do this number of Hail Marys and this number of Our Fathers, and then you're good. But isn't there a part of us that's like, really, is that it? Is that all that's needed, that I go through the motions? In Yogananda's prayer demands, that's why he called them a prayer demand. He said, we are children of the infinite. And if we are really in line and in tune with what God's will is, God wants us to find him. They say in in the Vedas that the amount of energy that we are seeking God is seeking us too. And we have to match that energy. We have to meet God halfway. So with these prayers, how much of us is really showing up? I mean, Yogananda, heaven's sake. There's a great recording of him doing from SRF that's called Chants and Prayers. I think that's what it's called. And it has like 3 or 4 recordings of him doing some of his whispers. And he's yelling. I mean, this isn't just, our Father, word, hallowed be thy. He's saying, oh, God, I'm going to wake you up. I'm here. I'm ready for this. So baby steps, though, right? When I first came to Ananda, and I've noticed it with other people, there are obstacles that come up to even making these life changes. Initially, I thought it was big. When I first came to Ananda, I was 18, and I had to go back home and deal with all of these things, growing up things in order to even come down there. I had to get my driver's license. I had to do this. It seemed like endless. And I had just finished up the last thing. I think I had gotten my license, because I put that off for like 2 years. I had just gotten my license like days before I got on a Greyhound bus to come down to Ananda. And 10 years later, my wife and I, Bhakti, we had this inspiration. We knew somehow, even beyond any logic, right? We knew that we needed to move up to Camano Island to be part of the farm community. And there was nothing reasonable about it. This was the biggest test that I've had so far. And so we knew, on the one hand, we both felt it. We felt the joy of being there on the land and the vibrations that we felt. But then when we thought about, in reality, we're like, well, there's no place to move to. What are we going to do? We have a 4-year-old. Maybe, I think he was 3-year-old at that time. There's no house. But it was July, so everything felt possible, right? Oh, well, we could pitch a tent, What did our hunter-gatherer ancestors do? We'll find a cave somewhere, Whatever it was, but we knew that there was something there, that we had to follow it. So then we talked with Zach and Haley, and we said, what do you think? And they said, this feels right too. There's a lot of joy in it. So we had 2 or more, 4 people tuning into it. And then we talked with Riman and Padma, and they said, sounds like an adventure. And sure enough, they reminisced on their A-frame and trailer, back in Ananda Village. It was very rustic. And we thought, well, what's the worst that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? If this is God's will, let's meet it. So we did, and it took about 2 or 3 months, and then something opened up, But you wouldn't know. We had been waiting 2 or 3 years for something to open up to make it work, right? And then finally the answer was, if it's right, you do it, and the next step will be shown. That was so instructive to me because, before that in my life, it's usually, oh, well, there's my next avenue. There's the next job, right? Or, oh, I found a house. Now I can move into it. It was very step by step. But once you get into the flow of God's will for you, buckle up. Swami Kriyananda, he lived this weekly, where he would get an inspiration. Didn't make sense to anybody else. And he really thought about it. And he said, a lot the great souls and the people with that joy that we're seeking, they've done it together. They've done it in a group. The last thing I wanted to say is just to read an excerpt from Krishna's words. This quality of equanimity is one of the first things that attracted me to the spiritual path. When he says, unaffected by outward joys and sorrows, or by praise and blame, secure in his divine nature, regarding with equal gaze a clod of mud, a stone, and a bar of gold, impartial toward all experiences, whether pleasant or unpleasant, firm-minded, untouched by either praise or blame, treating everyone alike, whether friend or foe, free from the delusion that in anything he does, he is the doer. Such a one has transcended nature's triune qualities. Remembering God is the doer, that is really the linchpin of this, of living a life of faith. As soon as, at the moment that we think that we are the one that's doing it, and of course we're doing it physically, right? I mean, we know, but to know that we are a channel, we are an instrument, that if we are living a life that's in tune with God's will for us, then he will give us the power to do it. To never forget that the power comes from God and we are the vessel. Just wanted to end with this song, Walk Like a Man, which really epitomizes that sense of following what we know to be true in our hearts and putting out the energy to go ahead and just do it. To not be passive in our search for God, but to take action, to take the steering wheel in an outward way, but to remember that God is still the driver. So, walk like a man. Walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? Life's but a shadow once our dreams have flown. What if men cry, your dream is not our own? Your soul knows the answer. Go on alone. Give life your heart. Bless everything that's grown. Fear not the loving. All this world's your own. Make rich the soil, but once the seed is sown, seek freedom, don't linger. Go